Welcome back, guys. Had a couple of comments and emails asking me to give my thoughts on the termination of Britney Spears Conservatorship.
We love her. We want her to be so happy and do whatever she wants. She deserves the
Protect her
world.
at all costs.
Protect Britney Spears. She's a treasure.
There's not a whole lot to say about this. It's pretty much done, but we'll talk about it very briefly, so today's video is going to be really short. We have 4 areas to talk about today. We're going to talk about number 1, is this a big deal or not? Number 2, what is a conservatorship? Number 3, we're going to cover some crowd reactions. And number 4, we're going to talk very briefly about potential abuse of conservatorship. So let's get started. So first of all, we're going to talk about how big of a deal this is. And for Britney Spears, this is a really big deal. But from a news perspective, this is really not that newsworthy because this was really decided back in August when her father, Jamie Spears, who had been serving as the conservator, essentially indicated in court filings that he wasn't going to contest this. He indicated back in August that he agreed to step aside as the conservator. Now, if you recall, Britney Spears Conservatorship started way back in 2007 in the wake of her divorce with Kevin Federline when he was granted custody of the kids. Then she shaved her head, had some run-ins with the press. And while I can understand how being followed around constantly by the paparazzi would be beyond annoying and probably enough to make anybody a little bit crazy, nonetheless, a judge saw a lot of what happened and then in 2008 extended her conservatorship indefinitely. And that's been going on for years. There have been court battles up until just a couple of months ago when her father, Jamie Spears, finally agreed to step aside as conservator. So when all parties agree and there's not really a whole lot of disagreement, essentially the judge has to listen to everybody, make sure there's not anything crazy going on. But this has really been essentially a foregone conclusion since back in August. Now the order is final, and she now in a lot of ways has her life back, so to speak. So part 2 of today's video, what is a conservatorship? Now this is one of those legal terms of art that means something, and you might have an idea that, hey, maybe it has something to do with conserving or conservation, and at least in theory it does, right? It's someone who's meant to be appointed to conserve the estate against waste or fraud or abuse or that kind of thing, and conserve as much of the money as possible for the proposed ward. Now, different states, as I said, call it different things. In Texas, we call it a guardianship. Other states call it different other things. But fundamentally, this is the legal process of turning a legal adult back into a legal child. There's something weird that the legal system does here, right? We assume if you are 17.9 years old, if you are 17 plus 364 days, it's the day before your birthday, you don't have any rights. Basically, you have the rights of a child. You have the same rights as like maybe a 12-year-old has under the law. But boom, on that day, on day number 365, you turn 18 years old. Suddenly you have all the power to go and sign any horrible deal and make any mistakes. And you now suddenly are considered to be fully mature in the eyes of the law. Obviously, that's artificial and unrealistic. And we know that people slowly gain maturity over a long time, or in the case of some of us, perhaps never. Now, let's clear up something else. A conservatorship or a guardianship is not just one thing. There are many, many different aspects of a conservatorship or a guardianship that can happen, and you can have various legal rights revoked or not revoked depending upon the circumstances. So this is very commonly used for elderly adults who start to lose their mind due to dementia or Alzheimer's or that kind of thing, who we think present a risk of being taken advantage of by unscrupulous people like the Social Security scammers or the Microsoft tech support scammers or any of these people that might call folks and really prey on the elderly and really take advantage of the elderly, where a normal person would say, oh, whatever, you're just some scammer, and it's obvious. Maybe to an older person who started to have dementia and started to lose some of their cognitive faculties, maybe it's not so obvious that that isn't really Social Security calling, or that isn't really Microsoft, or maybe they really do think their car warranty is expired or something like that. So really, really predatory stuff. That conservatorships and guardianships are designed to protect elderly people from this kind of thing, not specifically phone scammers, door-to-door salesmen that might take advantage of elderly people, all kinds of scams where unscrupulous people might target the elderly. Now, there are many, many different aspects. Like I said, you could have the right to be married and have kids revoked. That's one that was revoked from Britney Spears. You could have the right to vote revoked. You could have the right to manage your finances revoked. You could have your right to obtain a driver's license revoked. If we don't think that you're capable of driving a several thousand-pound machine of potential death on the highway. We don't really want you driving, so we're going to take away your right to get a driver's license, etc., etc. Now, this can get controversial in some cases because very frequently a conservator or a guardian is compensated by a percentage of the income and outflow of the estate of the ward. Now, in the case of a, average income, average assets, elderly person who's starting to go crazy and so forth, yeah, maybe that's not such a big number. Maybe 1% or 2% would be reasonable under those circumstances. But in the case of Britney Spears, who is making hundreds of millions of dollars and has these massive incomes, well, her father, Jamie Spears, who was the conservator of her estate, 2% of $100 million is $2 million. That's a lot of money, and she's making well over that. So he's being extremely well compensated based on these relatively small percentages that for most any other guardianship or conservatorship, wouldn't be that much. So that's why a conservatorship or guardianship can be controversial in a lot of circumstances. And that's particularly why it was controversial here, because he was being compensated a huge amount of money for managing her financial estate. Now, it can be argued that, yeah, he was making some very complicated financial decisions that required a lot of expertise, consultations with experts, so on and so forth. That's all true. However, it can't be disputed that he's getting some really big checks. So part 3, as promised, we're going to recap some of the crowd reactions here. Some of these are funny, some of them are informative, some of them are insightful. So let's roll some tape.
First of all, it's not about Britney Spears, the entertainer. I mean, the whole Britney brand isn't even Britney Spears herself. It's an image, she's an actress playing a part.
Britney, if you see this, I love you, I support you, and you're amazing. You're an angel on earth.
Next up, we have a guy who says that guardianships and conservatorships aren't about mental health.
Mental health is not a reason that she should be in a conservatorship. I think her team has stated before, allegedly that they think she needs to be under the conservatorship due to her mental health, but they're normally for people that are incapacitated.
That's not really true. However, he's half right in that you can be mental health impaired and still have the rights to manage your affairs to a large extent. Now, fourth, we're going to talk about the potential for conservatorship abuse and guardianship abuse. There is a fantastic film called I Care a Lot, starring Rosamund Pike and Peter Dinklage. If you haven't watched it, it's a great drama and showcases at least the potential for elder abuse. Now, is this really the case? Is this film realistic? Generally, no. On the other hand, is it true that guardianship or conservatorship is sometimes abused? Absolutely. So this Free Britney movement has really given center stage to a lot of people who are using this celebrity saga to shine light on potential guardianship and conservatorship abuses. That's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
However, we should keep in mind that a lot of times guardianship or conservatorship is the answer to elder abuse. Elder abuse is very widespread in society, and a lot of times the filing of a conservatorship or a guardianship is used to stop elder abuse that is currently ongoing by someone who really is abusing a position of trust. So at the end of the day, anyone who is involved in a guardianship or conservatorship suit should be very cognizant that the process, like I said, the process of legally turning an adult into a child is not something to be taken lightly. And revoking some of these rights from someone is not a small thing. And that process should be taken seriously and considered as the very strong, very grave legal remedy that it is. That being said, sometimes it's necessary. A guardianship or a conservatorship is often a good thing, even considering the compensation of the guardian or the conservator. Now, was that the case for Britney Spears? I don't know. I'm going to leave that for more intelligent commentators than myself. This is just to give you an overview of what happened, what's going on, and what on earth is a conservatorship. As always, if you're enjoying the videos, like this, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.